All right, that was fast. Hello.
Hi. Very quick.
All right, we'll wait just a minute to let everybody get on and then we will get started.
Sounds good. I'm really digging your lobsters on your shirt.
Thanks. This is actually one of my favorite shirts.
Yeah. Big fan.
Yeah, I have a an owl shirt, a lobster shirt, and then I want to get one with the logo from the delivery company all over the shirt like this eventually.
Do you have a custom shirt resource that you
I,
have?
I don't. I wish I did. I need to look into it. Some of them are kind of expensive, so hopefully I'll find a good place for that.
Please share.
All right. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for joining. All right. I think we can go ahead and get started. So, first off, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. My name is Lane Northcutt. I'm a young adult author of the upcoming delivery company. And this is the 12-day launch event for my upcoming release. So, the delivery company is a young adult novel, focuses on two teenagers who are fighting to dismantle the very system that created them. That's a very short one-liner for you. Um, Now, every night I will be interviewing a different author or indie publishing professional. And at the end of each night, I'll be doing a giveaway of one of their books or resources. And at the end of the whole 12-day event on my launch day, I will be doing a grand prize drawing where you can win everyone's books and resource all to one person. So be sure to follow me on Instagram and be present, and then you can win. Tonight, I am very excited to be interviewing S. Elizabeth Cook. She is signed with Olympia Press and is the author of Crawling Home, Lit Lost, and the brand new book of poetry, Yellow Light. So S. Elizabeth Cook is a true romantic and poet native to Kentucky, stumbling from coffee shop to tavern to the edge of boulders and shorelines. She scribbles poems and haikus on napkins and forgotten scraps of paper. S. Elizabeth began her poetic journey by posting photographs of her work on social media and continues a daily haiku project. So welcome.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. And I'm super excited about your book. Every time you talk about it, I'm getting this like Ayn Rand vibe, dystopian. I can't wait to read it.
Thank you. I'm really excited to have it released finally. I've been seeing a lot of comparisons to different other books, like, the big name titles, which is great. So I'm always happy when somebody does a comparison like that.
Hmm.
Um, so I gave a little bit of your bio, but for everyone else, can you just give us a little bit about yourself, where you're living, and where you're spending your quarantine, and how life has been so far during quarantine?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm a Kentucky native, but now I'm living in St. Louis. So in Missouri, I moved here. God, I think it's been 5 years now. It's a long time.
That's a long time.
It feels much longer, but I'm happy that I stayed because I am spending my quarantine with my new fiance. We just got engaged and
Woo!
living the life. We have 4 pets. Trying to find time in between there to write with our, people would think you have more time with COVID and quarantine, but you do not actually. There's actually more things that you're finding to do. So I'm just trying to sprinkle in some poetry here and there.
No, I totally understand that. So, um, speaking of your writing, how long have you been writing?
I think if you ask any writer, they've been writing for their entire life. So I don't know, since I've been able to write, I think, but professionally, I've been writing for about, I don't know, 6 years now.
Okay. And what kind of drew you into seeking out the professional route?
I had something to say, I think there's something in us and we need to pull it out and we need to give it to people. And, I think that I love writing for myself and, my loved ones, but I had something to share and I wanted to share it with the world or, my readership anyways.
Right. So can you talk about your writing style? Like when do you typically write and for how long?
My writing style is poetry. I dabbled in fiction and I just can't. So I applaud all of you fiction writers out there. It is nothing that I can do. It takes a different talent. Um, but the writing style is poetry. I tend to lean more towards freestyle. So there is some rhyming in there, especially slant rhymes. I love a good slant rhyme. But it doesn't follow any type of meter, iambic pentameter, or anything like that. And they're love poems generally. And I say love poems not to mean those you're always reading something sappy, and it's like, oh, experience this joy of my life. I think that love is most beautiful when there's heartbreak or there's pain or a type of doubt or guilt. You know, I think love encompasses so many things, whether it's a person that you're with or a person that you see or a person that you lost.
Oh yeah, and I think I've been noticing that actually a lot on your Instagram page, and actually reading some of Yellow Light. You know that there's a lot of, while there is a lot of happiness there, there's also quite a bit of loss.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, and some of your inspiration for some of your work?
My inspiration spanned from, you know, who my partner is at the time, who my muse may be. It could be someone that I just see at a coffee shop or a tavern, you know, just like around the corner, and I liked the way their hair fell in a specific way, or it's really just the people that I see. And then sometimes I even write where I am on the other side. So I'm writing a poem as if they were talking about me. And
Hmm.
those typically get me the most because it makes me really look at myself and reflect on who I am and what I'm doing to other people. Um, because unfortunately, when you're writing about other people, you tend to cycle through a lot of people at the time, you know, whether it's a romantic partner or a friend. I used to live my life to, you know, bring as many new people as I could into my life so that I could have inspiration. And I would say in the last year and a half, I've gotten so much better to where I'm settled, right? Like I have the love of my life that I don't feel like I need to replace or chase something else. And I'm now drawing inspiration from outside things. So my writing is actually changing so much. So the next book may not be about love at all, you
Yeah,
know?
you have enough love at home right now. And speaking on that, do you think that your work might tend a little bit away from the loss and the heartbreak now that you found somebody that you love so much?
It is much harder to write now. It is, I do thrive off of the pain.
Yeah.
It's, I said, I'm starting to write more about the world around me,
Hmm.
include me or include a person that's in my life. It's more of just my observations. You know, I wrote about the California wildfires. Wildfires, and I've not seen them. You know, I've not been a part of it, but it affects all of us. You know, what's happening out in the world. So I needed to say something about it.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I don't know if you know anybody personally that lives out there, but I've seen many friends posting that they've had to evacuate their homes during those fires and such. So I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to be there, but I would like to think that if I read your poem about that, that you probably do a very good job of placing us right there with the flames, I'm sure.
I hope so. That is, but I mean, and you know, just going back to when people read and they are seeing so much love, you know, with Yellow Light, I just had a review from someone. It was a very honest review, and they were just like, it was too much love. And
Hmm.
it's almost like the people who are reading, art is up for interpretation, right? And
Of course, yeah.
a little bit tragic to our expense, because when I wrote Yellow Light, it wasn't about love for me. You know, parts of it were, but it was really about guilt and doubt and heartache and just sprinkled with love. And so it made me really reflect on the way that I write and the words that I choose, that it's coming across the love poems to other people when to me I could be in pain.
Yeah. So like, I mean, there's kind of like that saying, right? Like one man's trash is another man's treasure, but like for you, it's like one person's love is another person's heartache, right? And so,
Yeah.
and I think it's very interesting. Um I mean, like Dan J. Wright says, I love thinking about how much your writing changes over time. With that, do you think that do you ever go back and look at some of your early poems and just be like, oh, that
Ugh,
is absolutely trash? Or do you look back and be like, wow, I still love that. You know, that was part of me, but
yeah,
I'm not that anymore.
both. So I mean, you know, right, like the writing changes over time, but also the meaning of a poem changes over time. So I was reading my last book, and reading it now, the poems mean something different to me. I'm taking something different away from it, as if I didn't write it. You know, I'm looking
Right.
at this, and sometimes I read books and I'm like, man, that was terrible. I should never put that into the public eye. And then sometimes I read them and I'm like, good job, good job there, you did. job on that poem.
And that's a good thing. You know, sometimes I think us writers tend to be very critical and hard on ourselves, you know, and it's nice to be able to every now and then look back at something and be like, you know what, go you. That is really nice.
Yeah,
Um,
I
yeah.
so critical. And I was watching your interview with Sarah Hill yesterday, and it putting your first book out there is very hard, and we almost don't want to because we don't feel like it's good enough or we don't feel worth it.
Hmm.
You have all these big names out there like, you know, Stephen King, and it's like I'll never be that, right? And so it's hard for us to do that, but I think it's even more important to give ourselves the praise, because you, Lane, could tell me all day that I'm a good writer, but if I don't feel like I'm a good writer, then I'm not going to go out and do more.
Oh, absolutely. And Molly was bringing up some good points in the comments here, that it's a lot like songwriting, and a song belongs to the composer up until it's released into the world. Then it belongs to the listener. Do you feel a similar way about your poetry?
I do. I feel like I've actually said that exact same sentence, only about song with poems. I've always believed that the poem is yours. You know, I write it and I have a feeling about it, but as soon as I give it out, however you interpret it is what it is. You know, like the definition is what you make it.
Right. Now, Michelle's asking, what's your favorite poem? I'm going to open that up to just in general. Do you have a favorite poem that you think of?
Yeah, it's a little cliche. We have a favorite poem. It's Robert Frost, the road not taken. I read it. It was the first poem I really read and really dived into in high school, and it is stuck with me for my entire life. And you know, I always feel kind of silly saying it because as poets and authors, we could really dive into these indie authors or these obscure poets and stuff, but I can't get past that one. That one is it has stuck with me for over a decade.
Yeah, I mean, the grades are great for a reason, I think. And I mean, while it's very important for us to support our indie friends and other people that we know that are in the traditional world, you know, we have to remember that those people, the names that we can name off the top of our head, like Stephen King and Robert Frost, are there for a reason. And it's good to give them some praise every now and then too, you know. So um, also, we have a question in the comments of where's your favorite place to write?
The bathtub.
Interesting.
I've always said that my best pieces come from when I'm taking a bath, and it's because, you know, I get hot, and so I'm like, you know, sweating, and I feel like I'm working, and I have a glass of wine by me, and some, you know, pre-lit candles, and I put on my favorite playlist to write to, which is Hosier. I love writing to his songs, or just like put on a Pandora playlist of Hosier, and everything serves you great. And I just write, and I almost kind of black out during those moments too because I feel very in the moment.
Yeah. I I am one of those people that, and when I'm in the shower, I can't think about, I don't normally think about my writing. I'm usually singing in the shower.
Hmm.
But every now and then I'll have, you know, an idea strike out of nowhere. And I feel like sometimes those are the best ideas. Like even last night at midnight, I had to like tell my wife, I was like, hey, what do you think about this idea for a book? She's like, it sounds familiar to something else, but you should look more into it. It seems really cool though. I'm like, all right, cool. Good night. Do you have moments like that?
Yeah, you know, when Lee is my fiance, when we're just like watching a movie or watching TV, I will hear a word. You know, like the phrase honeyed words has been stuck with me for 2 months now. And what I do is I hear it and then I'll go write it in my notes. And it's like, I will come back to this and I will write it. And I just have like multiple of those like one-liners that will eventually turn into a poem. I need the inspiration to then build off of that word.
Yeah. Um, So you've mentioned your previous books, and I think it's really interesting, especially for you, because I know you watched last night's interview as well, and we talked a little bit about the indie publishing world. But you are somebody who started in indie publishing, self-publishing, and then you've now since become traditionally published. And I believe you've had two publishers as well, right? So can you give us a little bit of an insight into your journey, first off of becoming a self-published author, and then into the traditional side?
Yeah, when I was doing self-publishing, I also used KDP. And I think I just knew less because that was, oh God, I don't know, what, 6, 7 years ago that I did that. And I was also younger, and I don't feel like I had the drive that I have now to really excel in self-publishing. So it didn't feel like the route for me. And so when I came to my next book, I wanted someone to do it for me, is what I'm doing. And I think there are some myths and legends about working with a traditional publisher, like you guys kind of talked about yesterday, is you don't just give it to them and they do it for you. There is some work that you have to do, but I've personally enjoyed moving into the traditional publishing just because, like I said, I am not the person that can go and do these, tactical things to get stuff done. I
Hmm.
like them to do it for me. But the marketing does really rely on you. Your publisher can reach out to their readership and their resources, but you may have, I feel like I have a very niche audience to where I need to pull them in that they don't know about Olympia publishers, right? So they're not seeing their ads or any of their, especially when it's in London.
Right.
So in the US aren't really seeing it. So I have to do my US based marketing by myself.
So, speaking of that, can you talk a little bit about how the marketing differs in the two markets, via the UK and then the US? Do you see much of a difference between the readership and also the stats, if you will, like of the royalties coming from each side?
Well, the royalties are definitely in pounds. Sorry, my dog is freaking. The royalties are in pounds, so that's always fun to see, like, because it goes up, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that's really nice. But well, I think the marketing in London has been a lot of like universities they market to, like Cambridge and a lot of libraries is where they're pushing their marketing. But then my previous book, where I used a US based publisher, it was very heavily social. So I've seen that difference to where going, and I don't know if it's because it's international versus domestic or if it's just these two different publishing houses, but um, the publishing house I'm with now is a little bit bigger, so the stats are more promising and more encouraging. But um, I will say that the royalties are much more elusive than when you're doing self-publishing. Like when you're self-publishing, you can see everything, how things are performing, and you can make adjustments as needed. As Sarah Hill from yesterday was like, the cover photo wasn't resonating. I had to change it. Here I don't know what's going on until I get a report from them every quarter. So that's been like the biggest difference is I don't have as much control over the changes I want to make when they do it, because my cover, I didn't design it, they designed it for me, they did all the formatting, and I gave my input and my insight, and I was able to give a little creative direction. But ultimately they're like, you signed a contract, but it's under name. And so what we think is going to sell is what we're going to do.
Right. But I mean, I would assume you're very happy with the cover. I personally, I love the cover. But I don't know. I'm sure you probably are obligated to say you love the cover, but
Love the cover. They sent me the one, and I did not like it, and I was very vocal about why I did not like it. And I think this one really matches what the theme of the book is. Yellow light is about the yellow light of morning and how it changes through the seasons. And so when you read the book, you'll see that it's broken up in the four seasons, and each poem is connected to the season that it's in. So I enjoy the leaves and how it's changing.
yeah. Now we have a random question from the comments, but they just want to know what your dog's name is.
That dog was Milo. he, he's very excited and he's very vocal. I think there's someone walking across the street and he got pumped.
And you have how many pets?
We have two dogs and two cats.
Oh boy. Do they make their way into your poetry?
I have written a poem about Milo once, and I did it to prove to my fiance that I could write about other things. So within Yellow Light, there is a poem titled Milo's Point of View. And so it's not about love at all. It's just about him.
I don't think I've read that one yet, so I will definitely have to check that out. Um, so you mentioned it a little bit, but can you talk a little bit more about your first first dive into indie publishing and becoming a self-published author? Like what were some of the ups you had and some of the downs?
The ups were the support. I feel like I've had tremendous support from not just my family and friends, but outside people who have just surprisingly followed me. Or when I started my journey, I used to leave my poems in the coffee shops and bars that I wrote them at, and I would leave my Instagram handle so people would find it, and that's how I really built my initial following. So the support was the best part of wanting to get out there and do it. Like I said, the downs for me personally of self-publishing was at that time it didn't feel like it was getting the exposure that I wanted to, and because I felt like I didn't have the expert support to help me get it there. If I were to do self-publishing now, I feel like I would have a much better handle of what to do, not just because I've seen what my publishers do, and I also professionally work in marketing, so I kind of have like a good handle of what to do to market something. And I have been considering doing a self-published book again, like a small chat book, just to see what happens.
That's yeah. I mean that I love that. And you said you work in marketing outside of your writing. So what's it like working in marketing and having somebody else do your marketing? Do you ever feel like do you ever talk to them and say like, hey guys, I think it'd be really great if we try this or try that using your own expertise?
I try not to because I don't want to step on their toes. Anyway, I mean, I definitely it's my book, so I put my voice in where it needs to go, but I'm trying to trust them. And I do trust. I mean, it's doing well, so I have no reason not to be, disappointed with what they're doing. But there is always that feeling of like, man, I wish there was more being done. And I don't know if that's because I'm also in marketing or because it's my baby and I want it to be taken care of.
Right. And speaking of babies, your debut, how was it releasing your debut into the world and what were some of the emotions that come out of that? And did you write any poems based on that?
My debut from the first Crawling Home, that book.
Yes, Crawling Home, sorry, yes.
Um, that one was, I felt like I put it out there and then I threw my phone down and then I stepped away from it. I was like, I don't want to see what's happening. I don't want to read anything negative. I don't want it to not turn the way that it did, but um, it ended up being okay. And I felt proud and I felt confident. And like I said, I don't feel like I had the drive to push it the way that it needed to be pushed, but um, it felt very good. And I definitely recommend everyone who has any type of idea or if they feel like they have something to say to just do it, right? Like if it's just your first time and you want to do a chat book and it's small and just to get it out so that you can get your feet wet to know what it's like and what to expect, just do it. Like KDP is free, so I mean try it. And then as Sarah Hill did, she was able to go back and change things, and you're able to do that, so you learn and then you grow.
Oh yeah. And speaking of going back and changing things, I don't know if you saw, but I got my final proof copy from Ingram Spark in the mail today from for my book. And so they apparently their cutoff line is very hard to tell on the template sometimes.
Hmm.
Um, so we got it back, and my name, I mean, it looks great, but the very top of the L is like chopped off on the spine.
Hmm.
And the front, there's a word on the front of the cover, welcome, that was a little too close for comfort. So we've already fixed that, and I've sent it back to them to get fixed for the pre-order prints. But I mean, talk about, some being a little bit stressed about like
Yeah.
the day's coming and you have to fix something. Um,
Yeah, I
I-
did that with Lit Lost, and because that was the first book I used a publishing house for, and I got it back, and there were a lot of misspellings, and I realized that it was me. I was misspelling in my poems, and so I had to like quickly go through and like change all the templates and then send it back, and it pushed our release date out like a week because apparently I can't spell, and so we had to fix it. But I think that it's worth taking your time, and even if you have to push dates back, like it's it's going to be out there for the world, and once it's in someone's hands, you can't change it.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of, Sarah Hill wants to ask, did you cry?
I didn't cry when Crawling Home released, and but I did cry when Lit Lost was released, and I think I cried for that one because it was a physical book. Crawling Home was only ebook, and I don't know. I didn't have anything tangible to prove that in my mind, it's not the belief of everyone, but in my mind, I didn't have something tangible to say I put a book on someone's bookshelf. But when I got Lit Lost in, I definitely cried for about a week. Just every time I saw it on my bookshelf, I cried.
Oh, we have another question. What's our editorial process?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I usually write my drafts. I go through them myself, and I have oh, I will definitely touch on that at the end. So I write them myself, and then I send them off to, I have a select group of readers that always, they pretty much read everything, right? Like I have a couple people I can always rely on. I send them the draft. They say, here are my thoughts. I then fix those based on that, those beta readers. And then I will send it to one more person who is very good about reading over everything and giving me the straight facts, like, they either love it or they hate it, and they will tell me exactly why. And then I always do a pass with my wife because I write young adult, and she reads pretty much nothing but young adult. So she can tell me for sure if it's working or if it's not. And she also has some really great input. So I'll make changes based on that, and then I send it off to my editor, and which I used Natalia Lee at Enchanted Ink Publishing. She is amazing. I only did a copy edit because I was pretty confident in the developmental side of things, and I have a person I chat with developmentally. But she came back with some great copy editing, as well as she also likes to like throw in suggestions or questions about the characters and the plot, and just to like be like, hey, this was also a little inconsistent. Did you mean this or that? And things like that, and sometimes more detailed questions. But after that, I sent it off to a proofreader, two proofreaders. And then after that, it was just off to the ARC readers to get early reviews. But what about you?
Well, I would typically take a pass through it, which isn't, I read backwards. I learned that through a creative writing professor is don't read something forward because your mind will just put the words the way they're supposed to be, or they'll read it the way it's supposed to be. So I will read, the poems backwards, which is fun. Highly recommend. And then for this book, my fiance is, I wouldn't say she's a professional editor, but she is wonderful at grammar and spelling and all things syntax. So I typically have her run through it, but the publishers have editors for me that will go through it, and we do about 3 rounds of editing. And with poetry, I think it's a little bit harder for people to tell me that something should be changed, because unless it's a spelling error, of course, please change that. But if I have a sentence fragment, or if I put a word maybe where it wasn't supposed to be, it was probably a creative decision.
And that's really interesting, because that's a big difference between writing fiction and poetry, right? Like, if I put some random word somewhere, it's definitely my mistake. And I totally did not mean that, most likely. But for you, do you use words almost like, to use a Christmas metaphor, like ornaments on a tree sometimes? Like, you just like place things where you think where you would like them?
Sometimes,
Or
especially if I'm looking at it visually, because I want the poem to also, I want the poem to also look good on the page. And so I try to like craft the way that it looks, if like I pick a different word because it has more syllables than the other one or not. But I would think the thing that I do the most is sentence fragments, because I'm a huge fan of incomplete sentences.
which so far you haven't spoken any, so that's good.
Yeah. But I speak very well.
Now, and you mentioned earlier that you used to leave your poems on napkins and scraps of paper out and about. And I've noticed that on your Instagram, you always post your little napkins or scraps, which really love the like torn up paper look even. I don't even know if that's like what you're going for necessarily, or if it's just like, I wrote it on this, I'm gonna rip it off and use the rest of it for later. But
Yeah.
I love that.
Since I started doing Instagram poetry, which I think is now becoming more and more popular, it is very visual. So I like to give someone the experience of not just reading it, but I want it to be very aesthetically pleasing. So, if I'm writing about something that's, broken, I'm going to put it against something that, paint's falling off or something like that. Or if I'm writing about a storm, I'm going to put it where there's debris. And, I want it to kind of correlate and to really give you the full experience of what I'm trying to say.
I love that. So you're not just giving us the words, you're also giving us the visual with it.
Mm-hmm. I try.
Uh, we also have another comment. MC says that also something awesome I found is editing chapters out of order, like chapter 1, then 9, then 3 gives you new ideas and perspectives. Do you find yourself doing that with your? I know that your poems tend to be pretty short, and some of the haikus especially,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. But do you find that you like to jump around, or do you edit in order if you're going through it on your first pass?
So for this one is the first time that I've kind of curated the way that I wanted it to read, because I had it in seasons, and so I wanted the poems to have a flow because it was kind of telling a story through seasons. And so for this one, I did edit before I compiled it into the season. So I didn't want to get so focused on like all of my fall poems or sound way and all of the spring ones. I wanted to look at it objectively before I put them in.
Okay. Now, can you talk a little bit about the difference between, or what you find to be the biggest difference really between writing fiction and then writing poetry for those of us who probably mostly stay in the fiction realm and have maybe thought about writing poetry but haven't really done much?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just speaking personally. I think the biggest difference I see is the character development. So in my typically the main character is either myself or the poem who it's about or whatever's happening in the world. I don't develop all these characters and then give them a story arc. It starts at the beginning of the poem and ends probably 15 lines later.
So would you say do you find it really difficult to condense sometimes your ideas into that short of a poem?
No, I find it difficult to expand. I think that I really excel at the haiku poetry because I like to say impactful things as quickly and with little words as possible. I think that I'm that person in real life as well. If I'm in my professional work meeting or if I'm speaking out in like a group setting, I typically say less, because I think the quieter you are, the more you get to listen, and the more impactful things can be when you say it more concisely. So when I write my long form poems, sometimes I feel like I'm just rambling because I'm just trying. I could have said what I wanted to say in a sentence, so like
Yeah.
it gets a little difficult for me.
Dan wants to know, what's your favorite season?
In the book, my favorite season is fall, but in real life, my favorite season is spring.
Do you have a reason other than just you love it?
It's gonna be super cheesy and corny, but fall is about my fiance, and so we met in the fall. So a lot of the poems really speak to her and were inspired about from her.
That's so sweet. I wish I had that kind of thing in my book, but unfortunately, people die and things don't go so well sometimes. So I probably would not want Shannon in my book because I'd kill her off. Let's see. We have another. Lane, have you ever, or would you ever incorporate poetry in your novel? Personally, I have not. Although I would love to at some point put a poem in a novel because back when I was in undergrad, I did do some poetry, and I actually had a poem in that one book that they used to publish at Murray. Um, I don't remember what it was called, but it was some poem about an iceberg. I remember that much, and I think it was a love poem. But
You're such.
uh, since then, that I did not do it. I was like, no, thank you, because I did not consider myself to be a good poet.
You're good. You're for people that don't know, Glenn and I went to college together. So, but yeah, I think you were really creative. I bet it was good. You have to find it and share it.
I'll have to find it and share it one of these days. And then we have, let's see, do you feel like you're better at business 7 years later? You recognize gaps in the market and what's best for ROI in the market.
I do, mainly because I work in business and marketing, and so I understand, what is needed in the market, and what is what are higher searched words, and the whole hashtag thing, and just visually, and what it takes, and what the costs are, and stuff like that.
Yeah. Um, Shannon is posting into the comments, don't tell people that people die. Yeah. I mean, they don't have to know who or if it's in this book. I'm also working on the sequel, so people definitely die. Um, Molly is saying notations. I wonder if that's Molly, I'm not sure what you mean by that, but I'd love to. Oh, notations. That's the name of the book. That was the name of the publication at Murray.
Good.
Okay.
Hey,
I'll definitely have to check that out. Thank you, Molly. Um, so now that we've talked a little bit about where you've been, do you can you give us an idea of where you're going? What are you working on now?
so for the last 7 years, I've been working on a haiku project, and so I've slacked a little bit in the last year just because life in 2020 is life. But I've been trying to write a haiku every day, and so my goal is to publish all of those haikus, and to find an artist, like an illustrative artist, to partner with me to then illustrate each haiku for me, so it jumps off the page a little bit more.
That sounds really cool. I would love to see that. How many are there? It's 7 years you've been working on this every day.
Almost every day. I will say that not. I have about 500 on Instagram, but I have a lot rest just like in my phone, or written in some diary somewhere on my bookshelf.
Do you ever find yourself speaking in haikus with as much as you write them?
No, find myself thinking, huh, that'd be a good idea for a haiku.
Um, so now that you've talked about that, are you working on another book, or are you thinking about dabbling in anything other than poetry in the future?
I have dabbled in songwriting. So in Yellow Light, I do have two original songs in there, and it says it in the title, like what the title of the song is, and then comma, an original song. But it's something that I'm really trying to get into, because I'm also trying to learn these instruments that I'm not doing a great job on right now. But I've always felt like poetry and songwriting are kind of hand in hand, and coming up with a good hook is what I feel like poetry is. You have to come up with that one line or two that really hooks them in, and then I just want to put that in a song.
Speaking of that, can you talk a little bit about your process when you sit down to write a poem? Do you think about the hook first, or do you just like, I know you said you do a lot of free form, but is that primarily how you do most of your poetry?
Um, it could go a couple of ways. One, it can be, like I said, I hear a word and I'm just really intrigued by that word, and I want to build off of that. And so I typically write the word a few times on a piece of paper, and just I'll circle it and do some doodles, and listen to music, or watch people, and then I'll go from there. And the other one will be, I will think of, um, like an event of something happens, like my partner rolls over to me in the morning, and I'm going to think just about that and how that makes me feel, and what everything looks like around her.
That's really interesting. I really don't. I like For me, I can't sit down and just when I think write a poem, it still is like the same. My mind would not get around the fact that it's not like a novel, and I would be like, okay, so where does it start? Where does it end? Who are the characters? How do I make this happen?
Hmm. Well, and then also you can't over explain, right? Like I can't say the way she rolled into me 12 different times. I need to say it one time. Where I feel like if you're writing, a novel, you really get to dive into the little details of an instance, or an item. And with poetry, you can do that. I just don't.
Right. And I think for me, and something that you said you excel at is something that I think the reason that we tend to, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason we tend to gravitate towards certain aspects of writing is because it kind of mirrors the way that we almost the way that we speak, right? Like you say you like to hold back, you speak you speak when you need to and want to say something, and usually it's shorter and meaningful. Whereas I tend to ramble or just say everything and all things and just blah 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 until I've probably repeated it 5 times, and my wife is like, "You've said that enough," you know.
I'm laughing because if my fiance were here, she would also say that I talk too much. I go round and round in circles down a rabbit hole, but I think that's just with her.
um, Speaking of, I know this is not on the list, but how did you meet?
We met via Bumble. So it was I I had just downloaded it, and I really felt like I was ready. Before then, I was ready to have a partner and to settle down, and it just wasn't happening. And I'm the type of person that I refuse to get in a monogamous or committed relationship unless I see it being it for me, just because I don't want to waste like our time or your time or my time. And so I got on Bumble, and I think we matched like the day I downloaded it, and we talked for, I don't know, a couple hours, and then she gave me her phone number, and I deleted the app, and I was like, this is it. This is who I'm going to marry. And we talked for a few times, via text, probably a couple of weeks, actually. I always tease her because we made a few dates, and then she would cancel on me. Like, I think she was sick one day, or her dog was sick one day, and she had to work another. And then we finally met, and I swear I left that day, Lane. I called my mom, and I was like, Mom, I'm going to marry her. And, here we are. Now we're engaged.
That's amazing. It's I bet it would have been really nice if your mom had somehow recorded that phone call and just so you could play it back on the wedding day.
Yeah. Well, funny story is we got engaged over the holiday week last week, and she proposed to me, shockingly, and she read an entry from her journal of the week that we met, and it was also her talking about how she felt about me and how real it felt for her. So it was just really nice and validating to know that we kind of had the same feeling.
Yeah, I love that. Is there any chance that we might see a stray poem make its way into your book from Lee, her point of view during the time that you met?
A phenomenal writer too, so maybe, who knows? It might be like in the acknowledgments.
I just think it'd be interesting to see your dual point of views of the same like time frame, same instant.
We should do that. Thanks for that. That's going to be next that we now take.
Don't hate me, Lee, when you see this. So speaking of, I know we chatted a little bit earlier about Yellow Light and some of the poems in there. I would love if you could pick one to share with those watching.
Yeah, absolutely. I earmarked one. Heads up,
And my
this is not about my fiance, so don't think that. This also, just fun fact, this is the first book and first time that I've titled my poems. I typically don't title them because for me as a reader, I've always felt like the title really informed me the way that the poem was going to be or what it was about. And I like my readers to just, I don't know, interpret it the way that they want to without the influence of a title. But I did title these poems. And this one is titled, Always Remember Her This Way. A sullen Missouri sky loosens, hangs on by a thread above restless sunken eyes. The stars pull at the seam to unstitch itself from the humidity hugging at state lines. It reaching and begging stretches towards the yellow light of an Indiana morning, to fit inside pockets of sunrise folding over a gaping window. Can it rest and find a steady wind above her as she wakes? Will she welcome and remember the sweat of the way she once settled into me? I will always remember her this way, like snow that melted to rain.
Wow, that is really visual.
Thank you. Thanks.
I really like the pockets of sun as well. I don't know what it is about that line, but I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm also the type of person, like, even on my book, like, I'll go through and like underline, like, this was my favorite. Self, like, pretentiously, this is my favorite of my poem.
Do you have a favorite that you've written that's not in any of your books? Like, do you have a poem that you just like kept to yourself and is like sitting on a shelf somewhere that nobody's ever seen?
Not in any previous ones. I do have spoken words that I don't share just because to me a spoken word is not meant for like an Instagram poem or a book. It is meant to be spoken.
Right.
And I do have a lot of spoken word poems that I've not shared and or read aloud because we can't go anywhere right now.
Does Lee get a poetry reading every now and then? Do you perform for her?
She does not. She, she does not. I did, there was one time when I finished the manuscript. We were going to a poetry reading, and I was going to read a few poems from the manuscript, and um, it ended up going to like 1 a.m. So I didn't get to because we work, and and so we did come back, and I did give her my a private performance of those poems.
That's awesome. Um, so a lot of people are loving these. Can you tell us where they can find Yellow Light if they're interested in purchasing it?
Absolutely. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, all the major bookstores. Or you can get it directly from the publisher. I highly recommend ordering it through Amazon, just because you'll get it faster. uh, and it's under. So my name is Sarah Cook, but it's under S Cook on Amazon.
Cool. Do you actually, great question. Let's see. Here's a nerdy question. Do you use maths to create rhythm in your poetry or novel?
I don't. That is a cool question. I've never tried that. I think that I would like to. Like I said, I love a good slant rhyme, or words that don't rhyme, but if you say it in a certain way, they do rhyme. That's kind of the way that I like to go. Some like hidden rhymes here and there. But I know I'm gonna try that. Thank you.
And for me, I don't use math to create a rhythm, but I love alliteration. I mean, there's some sentences that I've written in my book specifically because I made sure that they did not get edited out because I was like, I want these words to be in this order because I love alliteration and I don't care if it's that great of a sentence anyway.
I do. I think a lot about French when I'm writing. I took one French class. And the one thing that I remember from it was, when you're speaking in French, it goes a lot like this. And so I really focus on that when I'm writing a poem. I'm trying to think about how it sounds when you read it. I want it to feel like you're going along this like sing-songy type way.
Hmm. Um, MC says, I use maths in my novel when the mages use spells. Oh, okay, cool. Actually, I like that. I'm a big fantasy guy, so I'll have to check that out. Um, so we're going to get into the section where we take questions here shortly. So those of you watching, if you have any questions, go ahead and shoot them into the comments section. I also have another question for you to add to it. I was just thinking since we were chatting with rhythm and such, have you read a lot of Shakespeare, especially the ones that the verse plays, and have you ever drawn any inspiration from those?
I did read a lot of Shakespeare when I did theater. We did a lot of, especially in high school, we did a lot of those plays, and um, just when we were at Murray, I was friends with all of you theater kids. So I just remember like sometimes at night we would just like read through plays, and there would be some Shakespeare there, but I don't for fun. I don't get into Shakespeare, but there was a poem one time that I wrote from the different perspective, and it's about when he's writing about like a mistress of his. I would have to look up the title of it. I don't remember, and it was also like 8 years ago.
No, that's cool. I've read a number of Shakespeare plays, but I still can't tell you what happened. Like my memory is so bad. You can tell me, oh, have you read this? I'll be like, yeah, yes,
Yeah,
but
probably
I don't remember what it's about.
probably
um,
like drama or theater. There's just so many Shakespeare plays that you either do or just like read through the monologues. And it's like I probably did read that one time.
um, all right. We're gonna wait for additional questions if anybody has them. While we're waiting for questions from the viewers, I'm going to give a little bit more information about my book and the event itself. So we had a question earlier about the book. I'm actually going to kind of do the same thing I did for you. So I'm just going to give you the blurb. That way people can hear it. So rejects are wrong, replacements are good. In a world where the government has sought to create the ideal children, the delivery company was born. In a lab, they create the perfect child for families who have lost kids or cannot have them. These children come from different varieties, but are all flawless. They are known as replacements. Children born with a disability of any kind are deemed a burden on society and discarded into the wild. These children are known as the rejected. Anna was raised in the world of replacements. Styx was raised in the clan of the rejected. When Anna finds herself rejected, she must learn to trust Styx and the others within the group of the rejected. Joining forces, Anna will aid them in dismantling the very system that created them. Together, they hope to gain equality for all and bring an end to the delivery company. So that is the blurb. It is on sale now. You can pre-order the book on Amazon, pretty much any retailer of your choice. I have a books to read, a universal book link. So if you go to my bio, you can click on that link and then you can buy the book. Oh boy, it's about to fall into the fireplace. Um,
I
but
I know I've said it before and I can't read it. I pre-ordered my copy. I am so excited. I'm also just really proud of you. So congrats on that.
thanks.
I just like I said, I just get this like really have you read Anthem at all by Anne
I
Rice?
haven't.
It's not anything like it at all, but I'm getting like the vibe of it is really what I'm feeling from it. And I love Anne Rand. I know a lot of people don't because of how problematic she is, but you know, I
Yeah.
writes really well. And the blurb just it gives me that dystopian vibe, and I'm very excited.
Oh yeah, it's definitely in the dystopian genre. And to answer your question, the premise kind of arrived from the question of like basically what would happen if society decided that all of us who are chronically ill or have a disability just weren't worthy of living in society anymore. Because I have Crohn's disease and that actually becomes more important in book two. I use a lot of disabilities and chronic illnesses and invisible illnesses and such as in characters throughout the book because I feel like it's an important thing to represent because we especially in YA you don't really see much of that representation. Like I think I said it last night with Sarah Hill. I was it's very much like a young woman suddenly knows everything she's doing and just struggles to choose between this man or that man, and the story could probably change slightly if she chooses one guy over the other, but I mean,
And she's beautiful but doesn't know it.
yes, exactly, it's always the you're flawless and so beautiful and blah blah blah, but I think I would like to think that while my book does not have a lot of spice as the people on TikTok say, um, it's definitely a clean romance, but I like to think that there's a good relationship within there. And
Think that now more than ever, especially with the invisible illnesses, especially like any mental illnesses or not, I think this book is coming at the perfect time.
I hope so. I hope to bring more inspiration into the books as I continue. Like I said, I'm only working on the second book now, and this is a trilogy. So I really hope to touch on some of those things too, especially mental illnesses. You know, and like you said, I think it's a good thing to bring into the fiction because while it may be fake, it very much is a real life topic, and many people struggle with this on a daily basis. So I think it's good to talk about, but also give you a little bit of an escape, you know. So when you're reading it, you don't have to
Yes,
totally think about yourself.
out, yeah.
But actually, that's a good question. Do you think something like the delivery company could happen in real life? That's actually one of the questions in my. I have a discussion guide at the back of the book for book clubs, but I would like to think no,
Hmm.
but at the same time, you never know these days. So I wouldn't put it past. I think honestly, when you think dystopian society, I honestly think that, and I think I've seen this from other authors. They've mentioned this, but um, and I think they even said like earlier books like Fahrenheit 451 and such. It's like we're not writing to create this totally unreal world or society that could never happen. We are basically twisting what we are currently seeing
Hmm.
into a slightly fictitious um in a weird lens, that way, so that yes, it's fake, but it's also possible.
And I agree with you, and I think that's how movies are too, especially with these superhero movies. It's to help us cope with what's actually happening. So it's a stretch enough for it to not be real, but it's not a stretch enough for you to not see yourself or your society or your community in it to make you pay attention.
Yes. um and while we were chatting, I was able to get all of the names into the randomizer, and it looks like we have a winner.
Cool, cool, cool.
Tonight's winner will be given a physical signed copy of Yellow Light. And I just need you to message me when this live is over so that we can get the book to you. And without further ado, tonight's winner is somebody who's been very vocal in the comments, MC Basil, I assume. So, yay!
Congratulations.
So on that, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me tonight. This is only day 2 of 12 straight days of interviews with different authors and indie publishing professionals. Day 12, we will be doing a launch party for my debut, The Delivery Company, and it comes out December 12th. Um, on that 12th day, I will be, like I said, doing a grand prize drawing where you can win every single book from the event, including Yellow Light. So I hope to see you there, and pre-orders are available now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Lane.
Bye.